to be the captain of your fate, the master of your soul, the director of your life. You must understand this about your thoughts.
So I'm on my morning walk, and I love walking in nature. It really rejuvenates me. I was, walking amongst the trees, the birds, and then all of a sudden I started thinking about the Kardashians. I don't know why, but I did. I started thinking about the Kardashians. And before I know it, I'm 200 meters up the road without any awareness of the trees I just passed, the birds, the beautiful sunlight coming through, such a beautiful morning, and no awareness of any of that, because in my mind I was thinking about how I thought Chloe was the nicest sister. And it just made me go, holy moly, I just lost a couple minutes of my life deeply thinking about that and in a completely other world. And it just made me go, oh my God, how powerful our minds are, and how we get what we think about, and where our attention goes, energy flows. And I was thinking, gosh, if I hadn't have snapped out of that, I could have spent my entire walk in that world that doesn't do anything for me. It doesn't lift me up. It doesn't enlighten me in any way. It doesn't raise my spirits. Yeah, and it just really made me start thinking, what do I spend my time thinking about? How important is our time? And also how important it is to be very careful about what content we consume, what TV shows we watch, what movies we watch, what we think about, what books we read. I remember the first time I heard the concept that your brain doesn't know the difference between reality and fantasy. It just doesn't know. So if you really focus on something and envision it and feel the feelings and allow it to flood you, your body thinks that you've experienced that. It was like years ago I heard this. I think I was like 17 or 18. So 30 years ago, this concept was like just mind-blowing to me. And I remember being told, basketball players, if they imagine that they're getting the free throw in, it's like actual practice, like their body is still programming that rehearsal. And it's much more common now, the whole idea of mental rehearsal, and now there's studies that show that if you imagine that you're lifting weights, your muscles actually grow a little bit. Sounds wild, but they've studied this, and it just made me go, wow, how much of our life are we just on autopilot, being thrown around here and there because we're not consciously choosing what we consume and consciously choosing what we think. And I've been taught that 70% of what we're thinking and feeling is not actually ours. We are just being bombarded by all of the thought forms around us and all of the energy around us, and that's why we have to be really careful with our energetic field, cleansing our energetic field, and being responsible for strong and loving boundaries. I'm a very sensitive, porous person, and I always have been. And emotional. I used to think I was really emotional, and just, things. I would cry at the drop of a hat if I saw an ad, see a bank ad that was moving, and I would cry. But I would talk to people and I would start to feel really emotional. And, now I realize I'm just very porous, and I'm picking up everything around me and people's emotions and feelings. And now I know, how to look after myself and protect myself in that way. But for a long time I didn't, and I was just buffeted around. And how much of my life was really wasted by thinking that those feelings I was having were mine, and that those emotions that I was experiencing were mine, and those thoughts. Oh my gosh, you can walk down the street and see someone and feel a judgment about them, and then be like, oh, I can't believe I was thinking that. I'm a terrible person. But actually that person is feeling that about themselves and projecting that out really strongly into the world, and you're just picking up on it. That is how powerful thoughts are. Thoughts are real. They are things, and they live on beyond us thinking them or the other person thinking them. So it's so important to really understand this and really take steps to protect yourself with just very basic energetic hygiene. my life dramatically changed when I was able to clear my field and know what's the difference between what's mine and what's someone else's, because you can't process someone else's reality, you can only process your own feelings. So if you're taking on someone else's stuff and you're like, oh, I feel terrible, and you're trying to work through it and you can't, it's because it's not yours to clear. So important. And you know, we only see what 1% of reality with our 5 senses. There's so much more that we don't even understand yet. I guess my point is really think about consciously, what am I consuming, what am I thinking, and practice bringing it back. As a child, I 100% lived in a fantasy world. It was a much better place to live for me, and whether or not I was a gymnastics champion or a karate champion or the hero of some story, whatever, but you know, a lot of kids live in these places and not in reality at all. And I always had my nose in a book. I was obsessed with books. You know, I loved the Enid Blyton series, and it just made me happy and took me to another place. And I had to really unlearn this. I had to really unlearn letting myself be completely swamped in another reality where all I could think about was the next chapter of my book. And reading is great and I'm all for it, but there's, you know, balance and harmony and equanimity in all things. And when I stopped living in this fantasy world, there was grief. There was a bit of grief that I had to go through when I had to accept real life and as it was, but then going from there, you know, on my journey, on my path of like seeking, you know, more, there was kind of an unbecoming that happened. And I really think that grief was really about feeling the deepness of the unworthiness that I felt, because whenever we need to be in a fantasy world about thinking that we're more than we are, or like winning at something or being the best at something, it's usually because there's a deep lack of worthiness and self-esteem. So I had to feel the depths of my grief about how, oh, actually this is where I am and this is how I feel. And then begins that beautiful, beautiful journey of self-exploration, of knowing thyself. You know, Socrates said a life unexamined is a life not worth living. And then you begin this beautiful love affair with yourself. You may not feel like it's a beautiful love affair, but it is a beautiful love affair with yourself, where you're just exploring and seeing what's there. And you can't do that if you're living in a fantasy world. You can't do that if you're obsessed with the Kardashians or whatever it is. So I just really encourage you to just have a look at where your attention is, what you're focusing on, and what do you want to experience? What reality do you want to live in? You know, I'm all for visualizing and manifesting things that I want in my life. But does this uplift you, and is it for your highest evolution and good? Or is it just to feel some deep wound, some poor self-esteem issues? You've really got to do the work on the self-esteem, because we're a society that is just got no love for itself. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a heart emoji in the comments. Let me know what you like to focus on or what you want to focus on. Have a beautiful day.